We're going to talk about crisis today, and the thing about crisis is that no mature person ever seeks out a crisis because they're hard. No mature person ever runs into a crisis. You're in my way, Josh. Come on. See, that was a little bit of a crisis because he might think, Blake's really serious. I'm not just playing. But here's the thing. We want to avoid crisis. We want to avert crisis. If at all possible, we want to do that because most crises need to be, or crises, however you want to say it, need to be avoided, right? Except there's that rare crisis, that rare moment that to avert the crisis would mean that you'd somehow dim your acute perception. It means that somehow you would numb or put Novocaine in the passion and affinity that you've been led to have. It would mean that maybe to not seize the crisis, to kind of avert the crisis would mean that you would step out of alignment, out of a divine alignment ever so slightly, not radically, just slightly. Not where you could tell it and everybody else could tell it around you, just where maybe 10 months from now or 10 years from now, you end up in a place you never wanted to be, becoming and being a person that you never wanted to be. All because of a crisis that had happened 10 months, 10 years ago. We began a series several weeks ago called Influencer. And we're looking at this thing called influencer. We know that there's a profession now called influencer. Those are professional influencers. They leverage their skill in social media to influence trends and culture and thinking and the economy. But those of us who are called to Jesus, those of us who follow Jesus, we're called to be influencers as well. Not necessarily professional influencers, although that would be fine. We're called to be personal influencers. And here's why. Because people's opinion, people's thoughts about Jesus, you shape those. If you're a follower of Jesus, you shape people's opinions and thoughts about Jesus. So much so that one of the earlier followers of Jesus, one of the earlier leaders of the Jesus movement, in trying to convince people that they were to be influencers, good influencers, he gave a word picture. And this is what he said. He says, we are ambassadors of Christ. Like it is, like you are the person that represents Jesus in this world. And just like we talked about the ambassador in Kenya represents America in Kenya, you represent Jesus on this earth. You shape people's thoughts and opinions of Jesus. And for that reason, we said we were going to take time and talk about being a good influencer. In doing so, we were going to go back to the latest piece of Hebrew history that we have, a guy named Nehemiah, who was indeed a good influencer. And what we discovered over the weeks so far looking at Nehemiah is there's kind of clues in his life of being a good influencer. And these clues are not just kind of clues, they're actually traits of a good influencer. And if you've got your follow guide with you this morning, I want you to turn there for just a second, and you'll see that there are 3 traits of a good influencer that we've already uncovered. I'm not going to go through those, but I want you to understand this. Those 3 traits, along with the one that we're going to uncover today, is going to lead Nehemiah straightway into a conflict, a crisis. It's a crisis that he can avert, or it's a crisis that he can seize. And he's at a pivot point. He's at a watershed moment. But first of all, let's uncover what that 4th trait of a good influencer is. We get this at the end of what we call chapter 1. We've already seen Nehemiah's ability to see. He has this acute perception. We also have seen Nehemiah's passion and affinity. And we've seen, because he's prayed so long and so well, his divine alignment. That's so important. He was not trying to get God on his side. He was trying to make sure that he himself was on God's side, that he was aligned with God. And then we get this phrase at the end of this long prayer that he prays, and we're going to find out that he's been praying this prayer of divine alignment for 4 months, fasting periodically, and he says this after the prayer. He says, now I was the cupbearer to the king. And you hear this and you think, that means nothing to me. And I understand that. It wouldn't mean any of us that didn't grow up in Persia or know something about Persian history, but at its basis meaning, or its most basic meaning, is that he is a guy that would taste the wine before he gave it to the king. Like he was in the palace with the king, and he would taste the wine and give it to the king. Now, he wasn't like a Persian version of a sommelier, okay? He wasn't going, okay, yeah, this will go good with what you're eating tonight. It pairs nicely with the I don't know, the beef that you're having. You know, it wasn't that at all. He was like a human litmus test. It's like he's drinking the wine, and everybody else around him is watching to see if he's going to turn green, purple, pass out, or be done. He is the human litmus test. That's what a cupbearer originally meant. And we get that sense from history. The other thing that we find out about a cupbearer, because of some archaeological finds that emerged at the late 1800s, is that they were really part of the royal court. It's interesting. There is this, I saw this book from the University of Chicago. I had to borrow it online. I've never done that before, borrowed a book online. But it has a relief in it of King Darius, who preceded this particular king, and we'll talk about him in a minute, but it's a relief of the king of Persia, then right behind the king of Persia is the crown prince, and then right behind the crown prince is the cupbearer. Behind the cupbearer is the armor bearer, the royal armor bearer. This guy was significant. What Nehemiah was doing was significant. And here's the thing. When you read other literature of this time, you find out that the cupbearer was more like the chief of staff. Whatever it was is this. He was at the high point of his game. He was some type of leader, some type of manager, and it is very likely that he wasn't the one actually tasting the drink every time. He had people doing that. And even if he was tasting it, someone has tasted it before him, because he has set in a system where all the food would be safe, where all the drinks would be safe, and he would have the final confidence to drink that before the king and hand it to the king. He was at the top of his game. He was as high as anybody that was of Jewish descent living in captivity could get living in Persia. He is in the palace. He has a cushy job. And if you'll remember, if you've not been here the last 2 weeks, go back and listen to those messages. But he is heartbroken because he has gotten word that 1,000 miles to the east in Jerusalem, the city is torn down and the people are in distress. And that is a crisis, but it's not the crisis that he is about to step into. And it's because of all those things and this trait that led him to be a cupbearer. And that trait is this. He had proven ability. And proven ability is just simply this. It is when you continue to develop the gifts that you have. I don't care if you're 8 years old or if you're 88 years old. You have gifts, you have abilities, you have talents, you have skills. And when you continue to develop those, and by developing those, you fulfill the responsibilities that you're given, that is proven ability. It's proven ability because people begin to trust you. And the king, his name was Artaxerxes, he continued to trust Nehemiah. He trusts Nehemiah. He trusts Nehemiah. And Nehemiah is now at the high point of his game, living in the palace of Persia. In that world, it didn't get any more like paradise. And so here's Nehemiah with this divine alignment and this passionate affinity for someone who is 1,000 miles away. But that is not the crisis. That's a crisis, but the crisis that he's about to enter into is something totally different, but it's related. So here's the backdrop. The backdrop is this. It was the month of Nisan. It means nothing to you or me, but it's late. It's late March, early April. It's been 4 months that he's been praying and fasting now. 20th year of Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes has been on the throne for about 2 decades now. Wine was before him, and I'm doing my job, Nehemiah says. I take the wine up and I give it to the king, and now I had not been sad in his presence. This is important. He's not been sad in his presence. The reason this not been sad in the presence is the same reason. If you went to see the President of the United States, you would not be sad in his presence. You just kind of know there's an air of demeanor that you need to contain yourself when you're in front of the president. Well, in the same way, in Persia, if you were in front of the king, you're supposed to be professional. And this was so important to the Persians that they wore bright colored clothes in front of the king. It was a very colorful culture. But the other thing you should know is that it was against the law. It wasn't just unprofessional. It was against the law to be sad in front of the king. It was against the law so much that if you had a job working in the court like Nehemiah did and you were sad in front of the king, you could lose your job. You could also lose your life. That was the penalty of breaking that law, being sad in front of the king. And so Nehemiah says something that we all should know because he has this proven ability. He's not been sad in the presence of the king because that would have not been professional. That would not have been proving his ability. His ability was, even if he was having a bad day, he would continue to do his job. And the king said to me, "Why is your face sad?" Boy, I bet you could hear a pin drop in the palace when he said that. Why is your face sad, seeing that you're not sick? This is Artaxerxes. He's talking to Nehemiah at this point. He says, this is nothing but sadness of the heart. And when Artaxerxes says heart, Nehemiah's heart moves from about 60 beats per minute to about 130 beats per minute. Whatever tell he has for being scared now shows up. There's maybe beads of sweat on his forehead. Maybe he's fidgeting with his hands. Maybe his chest is going up and down. And Nehemiah tells us all this is happening. He says, then I was very much afraid. And now he's at a point of crisis. This is the point of crisis. He can avert this. He can just simply say, no. I worked out at the gym today and I'm just a little sore. He could have said, hey, listen, my sports ball team lost last night. I don't even know why I pulled for them. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. My girlfriend broke up with me. I won't let it happen again. I won't be this way in your sight anymore. Crisis averted, right? But in order to do that, he has to dim his acute perception. In order to do that, he has got to tamp down the passionate affinity in his heart. In order to do that, he has got to step out of just slightly out of divine alignment. He's got to step just a lever so slightly, not radically. I mean, he can still go to synagogue on Saturday. He can still keep the Jewish laws. He can still be a Jew working inside the Persian court. That's probably good for the Jewish people that are in captivity. Might be a good thing that you stay there, Nehemiah. He can do that. Or he can seize the crisis. Stumbled upon an interesting word from the Chinese language this week. The word crisis, weiji. It's built upon two small Chinese words. And those two words are danger and opportunity. Crucial moment. This is his crucial moment. It's dangerous. But in that danger, there's an opportunity. And his heart is just, it's rocking his chest right now. And he can avert it. He can step away from it. He can step away from the danger, or he can seize the danger and go after the reward that might be in the opportunity. So he goes for it. He goes for broke, and he says this. First thing he says is, let the king live forever. That sounds like a term of respect, and it is, but here it literally as well. There's a reason he needed to say this to Artaxerxes, to say, hey, listen, Artaxerxes, I want you on that throne forever. That's what I want. Just want you to know, I want you on that throne forever. Here's the reason why. Artaxerxes had years before shut down an operation to rebuild Jerusalem. He had shut it down because there was a rumor, whether it was true or not. He had shut it down because he had heard that the Jewish people were not just wanting to build their city back up, but they were wanting to rebel against him and rebel against Persia. And he had shut it down. So Nehemiah is not only using this term of respect, he's saying, hey, listen, I respect you, but I'm not going to rebel against you. May you live forever. May you be the one on that throne always. And then he says, why should my face not be sad? When the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. Why shouldn't I be sad? And Artaxerxes looks at him and says, okay, so what are you requesting? What do you want? And Nehemiah writes, so I told him everything I wanted like he was Santa at Gimbel's on Christmas morning. No, he didn't do that at all. What he did is he does something in this moment that a man of divine alignment or a woman of divine alignment will always do. So I prayed to the God of heaven. Oh, come on, Nehemiah. You've just spent 4 months fasting and praying. This is your opportunity. Go for it. But he prays. He stops and prays. Before anything comes out of his mouth, something comes out of his heart. Now, you think about this for just a moment. He's talking to the king of Persia, but he toggles to talk to the eternal king of heaven for just a moment. Because he's divinely aligned. He wants to make sure whatever he's about to say is not what he wants, but it's what God wants. How much benefit would come into your life? How much benefit would come into my life, our lives, if we just took a beat before we spoke and prayed? Just took a beat and prayed before we spoke. Wow. He does this. And then he makes this audacious request to the most powerful person in the world at that time to do something that he is commissioned not to be done. He said, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, well, you know what? His servant had found favor in his sight because he had proven ability. He was number 3 in the court of Persia. That you send me. Key words, send me. I don't want to be in this palace. I don't want to be in paradise. I want to be with some people that are desolate and decimated. That's where I want you to send me. We said this last week. We'll probably say it again next week. But you remember all of this Old Testament that we have, all of this Hebrew history we have, it points to Jesus. Nehemiah, yeah, he might be one of the first to say, hey, take me out of paradise and put me in desolation. But only about 4 centuries later, Jesus would say, take me out of paradise, Father, and put me in desolation for these people. Send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I might rebuild it. And the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, this is so important, this shows that he was in an intimate relationship with them, but anybody reading this would have to think, anybody reading this that was of Hebrew descent and had read this when it was written, they're thinking, oh, golly, that's Esther's throne. There's a whole book written about Esther. Now, some preachers try to make this person sitting on the throne here beside the King Esther. She would be about 150 years old if it was her. So it's probably not her. We're pretty certain it's not, unless there was something unusual going on there. But, Artaxerxes could be her grandson or great-grandson or grand-stepson, something like that. And the king asked him, how long will you be gone and when will you return? And so it pleased the king to send me when I'd given him a time. And you would think at this moment that Nehemiah would be satisfied, that he's ahead now, like he has been sent. He can go. But he's too much of an influencer. He is too much of a leader to stop now. And if he's out on a limb talking this way, he has just stretched himself to the very tippity top of the limb, and it's just kind of bending over, and it's about to break. Because he goes just a little bit further, and he says, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to me to the governors of the provinces beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. And let also a letter, while you're write this letter too, to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me the timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress, the temple, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy. Lots of stuff there. You read this and you think, well, man, buddy, you ought to quit while you're ahead. I mean, that what you're saying might just tick the king off, but it doesn't. It doesn't tick him off, because here's this. Somehow there's a relationship that has been won by Nehemiah's proven ability with King Artaxerxes, and it pleases him to send him. He understands that these aren't greedy requests. These aren't really extravagant requests. These are leadership requests. In order for him to be able to do the work, in order for him to lead the people, in order for him to restore the city, for order for him to even make the 1,000-mile trip to the east, he needs this type of resources and these types of credentials. And so he asked for it. And the king granted me what I asked. For the good hand of God was upon me. Nehemiah had so divinely aligned himself day after day, getting up and declaring the greatness of God and submitting himself to God, that God's hand was resting on him. And he was able to do this. So what are our takeaways today? Biggest takeaway today is that each one of us in this room, we have been given talents, skills, gifts, abilities. Doesn't matter if you're 8 or younger, 88 or older, you have them. And God expects us to steward them well. Most of the time when we talk about stewardship in church, we're talking about, stuff that we put in the offering plate. But stewardship has to do with what we do with our time, what we do with our body, and certainly how we prove our ability. The other thing that we've discovered this morning is there are points in our life when we are divinely aligned and when we are doing our job that we are going to encounter crises or crises. Those points where we can avert them or we can seize them. Those points where you can say, yeah, it's dangerous, I'm going another way. Or we can say, no, it's dangerous, but I see the crucial opportunity in the midst of this crisis. And you step into it. I just want to give a warning, because some of you are sitting here this morning when it comes to crisis, and you are in the midst, and this is going to tie back to proven ability, and we're going to go through some prayers and we'll be done. But there are some of us this morning, maybe not a lot of us, but some of us, we are in a position right now and we don't love our job. We don't love it. It's hard. And you're at the place right now where you just want to bolt. You have got a picture, an acute perception of the job that you want. You have a passionate affinity for something else, and you're ready. You're ready, and you want to bolt. You want to walk away from it. I want to give you a strong word of caution and advice. Don't quit your day job. If you find yourself in that situation, don't quit your day job. Instead, do what Nehemiah did. Nehemiah gets this word. He gets this word out of Jerusalem from his brother that's told him all these terrible things. And remember, he has this physical reaction to it. He sits down. He has this emotional reaction to it. He weeps and mourns for days. And then he has this spiritual reaction or response. He prays a prayer of divine alignment for 4 months and fasts periodically. Remember, fasting, it's not about trying to get God's attention. It's not a spiritual hunger strike to get God's attention. It's so that your attention will be given to Him. And he gets up and he goes to work. And he keeps proving his ability again and again. I have a friend of mine who wrote a book, this really wonderful book called What to Do Next. And it's about when you're at that point, man, I think I'm finishing this chapter and I think I'm going to the next chapter and I'm not real sure what to do. It's a great book if you're in that situation. But this is what he says. He says, the path to your dream job often leads through your day job. Stay in it. Prove your ability. And then when that moment of crisis comes and it's an actual opportunity for you to move on, and you have the credibility to do so, take it. Seize the crisis and move on. So, each week at the end of these messages, I want us to walk away with a spiritual exercise, and I want us to walk away with a thinking exercise. And so I want to remind you of some just simple prayers that we've had so far as we've walked through this series together. And the first one is this. It's a prayer for divine alignment, but it's also a prayer. It's also a prayer for just acute perception and passion and affinity. Simple prayer. God, lead me to see what you see. Move me to care about what you care about. These are on the back of your flyer if you're following along. And when you find yourself, that's a simple prayer. Just, God, help me see what you see. Help me care about what you care about. Have you been praying that prayer? Continue to do so. And then there's going to be these moments in our life where we run up into crisis. We don't seek it out. Sometimes it seems like it's trying to find us. But in those moments, just a simple crisis prayer. God, give me the wisdom to know what to do and the courage to do it. You might be in that moment right now. And you need His wisdom. Remember to lean into His Word and remember to lean into His Spirit. He'll show you. Give me the wisdom to know what to do and the courage to do it. Now, before we go on to our last prayer, I want you to think about your thinking exercise for this week. And that's this. And this is a journaling exercise. And you might be thinking, I don't go to coffee shops. I don't own a journal. I don't do that. The only thing I write is nothing. That's what I write. Well, look, I'm not asking you to buy a journal. I'm not asking you to buy a fancy pen. Get one of your kids' crayons and use one of their pieces of construction paper. Take a piece of junk mail and write on the back of it with a little blunted pencil or something. But just take a moment and just think, what ways am I being trustworthy with my abilities? In the place He currently has you. God's placed you where you are right now. In what ways am I being trustworthy with my abilities, my gifts, my talents, where I am right now? Take you 5 minutes to write it down. Just write it down. Think about it. Stare at it for a moment. Trusting prayer. God, I trust you. I trust you, God, to use me and the abilities that you have given me in the place that you have put me. I trust you to use me and the abilities that you have given me in the place that you've put me. As we end this morning, I want to say a prayer here in just a moment, but as we end, if you're here this morning and you've never taken the opportunity to trust God for the first time, like step into a relationship with Him, like this would be a fresh prayer for you, because there's never been a point in your life where you've turned your life over to Jesus. Oh, maybe you've been to church a dozen times, or maybe this is your first time. But have you come to the place where you have given your life to Jesus? I'll give you the opportunity to do that. Susie will be up here, a fellow staff member with me, team member. I'll be up here, and we would love to talk to you about how you can begin a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Also, if you're thinking this morning, you're thinking, man, this is the type of church I want to be a part of. I want to be a part of a church that is serious about being a good influencer in Fayetteville and around the world. Places like Kenya and even Kentucky. If this is your church, we want you to join it. We want you to be a part of it. We're running hard after Jesus. Come, run hard with us. Let's stand and sing. I'll be down.